The mathematical formalisms of modern science are exquisitely accurate, offering consistent predictions, testable results, and undeniable utility. I wouldn't dare challenge the data, nor dismiss the established frameworks. There is, however, an opportunity to explore the recontextualization of what the established data and frameworks are actually revealing about the essential nature of reality. Take, for example, the so-called paradox of wave-particle duality. What this recontextualization suggests is that the apparent contradiction is not actually the property of a quantum object. It's an empirical demonstration of how the singular, unified presence of reality itself appears entirely according to context. In other words, the wave aspect of the apparent duality expresses the way in which reality's unlocalized pure potential appears in form, the way it naturally appears to interfere with itself within an unconstrained context. A context like the double slit experiment without certain detectors. Through that experiment, presence appears wave-like, revealing its inherent coherence, not as a thing moving through space, but as the formless potential for anything to appear, existing both everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. On the other hand, the particle aspect appears only through a context of localization. For example, an experiment with detectors that functionally ask, "Where are you?" Within this context, presence appears particle-like, reflecting the distinction imposed by the question. The wave of potential seems to collapse into a discrete particle-like event, simply because the architecture of the experiment imposes a context of thingness onto the appearance of presence itself. Analogously, it's as simple and natural as the distinction between the answer to a yes or no question and an open-ended one. The form of the question implies the form of the answer. The picture becomes even clearer when considering the role of the observer. Given that the unified presence of reality is ultimately all there is, only ever appearing as defined by context, the observer is simply another form of presence, specifically defined by the context of an apparent duality of subject and object. Both observer and observed are distinct only as contextual expressions of the same presence. The appearance of the observed is mutually implied by the contextual form of the observer. Hence why the appearance of a measurement always reflects the form defined by the measuring. In this way, reality appears to itself as a collection of localized things only through the contextual form of one of those apparently localized things. In other words, the observer does not measure reality independently. The observer is how reality, through a lens of conditioned localization, appears to respond to its own presence. In later videos, I'll aim to expand upon the recontextualization of this unified understanding and explore how it reveals a physics that looks less like the description of a clockwork machine and more like the map of a self-observing system, where the rules of interaction are inseparable from the act of interaction itself.